Welcome to the CareRight podcast, your go-to resource for all things elder care. Guiding us through this journey is Annalee Kruger, the founder of CareRight Inc, and she has been steadfastly supporting families across the United States. Each episode brings you expert insights, innovative strategies, and practical advice, ensuring that you're well equipped to provide the best possible care for your loved ones. Expect to gain valuable knowledge, learn from real-life stories, and get inspired to take action in your own caregiving journey. So buckle up as we dive into an in-depth discussion of elder care planning and together embrace the journey of caring for aging loved ones on the CareRight podcast.
Today we are honored to welcome Annalee Kruger, author and founder of CareRight. Welcome, Annalee.
Thank you for having me on your guest podcast show today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, Annalee, tell us about CareRight and what it is you're doing and how you're helping families.
Great. So I started out as a social worker and marketing director and then executive director in long-term care 30 years ago. Part of my role was to do tours with families when they would come in. Most of them were in in a crisis. Mom fell, she's in the hospital. Hospital says, here's a list of facilities, go find one by noon tomorrow because we're discharging. And so the kids were in the care communities doing the tours. They had no idea what questions to ask or what to look for. So the tour would only take about an hour, but I was spending 2 and 3 hours at a time with each family because they had so many questions about, well, how is care going to get paid? What can we expect from care in this care community? They weren't able to answer some of the questions that I would ask them, like, does your mom have a living will? Does she have a power of attorney? Is she a full code or a do not resuscitate? Does she have long-term care insurance? So the answers were mostly the same. They're like, I don't know. Our family never talks about stuff like that. But then I had like this many families in that 18-year period that would say, Annalee, we tried to get this information from mom and dad, but they gave us so much pushback that we quit trying because they wanted to salvage their relationships, right? So after 18 years of gathering all of this data that clearly families really don't talk about the what whens of aging. So I started CareRight Incorporated in 2011. It's a virtual family consultant company. I've been nationwide since 2011. And what I do is I work with families all across the country because the profile of a typical family isn't what it used to be 30 years ago. 30 years ago, everybody lived down the street from each other, but that's just not how it is these days. So I rarely have families that actually live in the same zip code, let alone time zone. So I facilitate their family meetings. I learn from them what's working well, what's not working well, what are their goals, which are usually to age in place at home, and what's the plan if staying at home is no longer safe, feasible, or viable for your loved one or for you. And where does it make sense for when you need more care or if you need more care that you would go to receive that care? So, for example, if mom and dad live in Tucson, Arizona, but their 4 kids live in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, does it make sense for mom and dad to stay in Arizona as they age, knowing that as they become more dependent and more vulnerable, and they're in and out of the hospitals more, and the kids, how realistic and feasible is it for kids to continually drop what they're doing and take time off work and take time away from their families to kind of come to the rescue and figure out what to do? So it's called an aging plan that I work with families. So we look at care options in the communities that the kids live in, if that's the direction that they want to go, right? So if it means through the course of one of those family meetings that the family has decided, let's look at Akron, Ohio as an example, and we'll move mom and dad closer to where the daughter lives or the son lives, then we do the care matrix with what are home care options in their area. Is there adult daycare programs in their area for those clients that would benefit from that type of service? And then we look at what care communities are available that they would be able to qualify to get into.
Now, when they're looking into these different types of long-term care solutions and services. Do you have relationships with these cities and different places, or how do you select the ones for them, or are you just going on and searching? How does that process work?
Yep. So we do the research. We come up with usually 5 to 8 different care communities, but to get to that 5 to 8, we might have had to research 20 different care communities. We don't have any contracts, or our services are paid for by the family, so we have their vested interest at heart. We're not a placement company where they get the kickbacks,
So it's not
from the
like a place for
facilities.
mom or
No,
like
no,
elder
no.
care finder. Yeah.
No, no, that is totally the opposite of my business model. We're very relationship based. And it's about educating the families about caregiver burnout, about dementia, about long-term care options, how to pay for care, how to support the family the best way possible, and making sure that they have all of their, through the grab and go binder, have all of their, legal documents in order, that they have their long-term care insurance policies, that everything is at the fingertips for when that information is needed.
And for a family that might be listening or watching this interview, and they might find themselves in a circumstance that mom is needing extra help, you had the geographical barriers that kind of prevents things from being as easy as, like you said, where it may have been 30, 40 years ago, where everybody lives in the same community. Walk us through the process. So somebody reaches out to CareRight. What's step one? And kind of walk us through the steps of what that's like.
Sure. So step one is scheduling a 30-minute consult. That's either on Zoom or over the phone. If they're in my direct area, they can certainly meet with me or one of my teammates in the Naples, Florida area, once it gets cleaned up again from the hurricane. But most of my clients, I'm almost 100% virtual. So they would schedule a 30-minute consult. They can either do that on my website, or they can just reach out to me directly. But through the website, we have an online calendar. So families can just pick what day and time works best for them. They don't need to prepare anything for that consult. It's just, I'll be asking them, or my team and I will be asking them, what's the reason for the call today? Are you concerned about the safety or well-being of your loved one? On that consult checklist, I have different boxes that they can check to see, are they looking for help with care decisions? Do they just want family meetings because they're not in consensus with how to best handle mom and dad's care needs? So it starts with that 30-minute consult. I get the information from them about what are their goals, what's keeping them up at night. And then we go over which packages that we have that would be the most suitable for what their situation is. Then they look at the proposal that we send to them, and most families agree to move forward because, unfortunately, by the time they come to me, they're in a crisis, and they have to make big decisions really quickly. So most people, it makes sense to them to put an aging plan in place. They'll be like, "Oh, how did we not ever think of that?" And I said, "Well, because you're in survival mode. You're in the throes of caregiving, and it's hard to think clearly when you're truly just in survival mode, trying to get everything taken care of, plus manage your own life."
Yeah, and you mentioned something that we see far too often, and that is people don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Most children of their elderly loved ones, and they don't even always have to be elderly, they're not really thinking about those long-term solutions or long-term planning. And you have something called aging plans. What exactly does that mean when you help a family with an aging plan?
Yep. So that's me facilitating their family meeting, or one of my teammates facilitating their family meetings. I find that most families don't know how to facilitate a family meeting, or don't even think about facilitating a family meeting. And they honestly don't know. They come to us so ill-informed that there's no way they could make smart decisions or informed decisions, because they're basing decisions off of wrong information, right? So for example, most people think that Medicare will pay for everything, like every single older adult expense, and that's just simply not the case. So, but when they think that, then they don't make good decisions, right? Or if they think that assisted living level of care is the same thing as a nursing home, then they're not making good decisions. So our model is very education based, and that way they can make those decisions that make the right sense for what their financial situation is and what their family's need is.
Hmm. Right. And what are some of the most common issues that you guys address or that you hear about at Caring Right or CareRight?
Caregiver burnout for sure.
Mhm.
So most people, 92, despite my best efforts at trying to get people to plan ahead and let's sit down and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of aging now versus at the crisis mode, 92% of my clients come to me in crisis. The caregiver is completely burned out. They have maybe used up all their vacation days or their FMLA, or the primary caregiver spouse might have just had a heart attack or stroke or died because they didn't have enough supports in place to help manage the care of the person receiving the care. And then just with a pandemic, families panicking because they couldn't travel to check on their vulnerable adults that were still living at home or in a care community, and they couldn't communicate with them at all. Other predicaments families find themselves in that they work with us on is just quality of care issues. Because they don't know what they don't know, they don't do the research of these different care communities, and so they plunk their loved one into a care community, not realizing that maybe that's a poor performer or that they've got staffing issues, which now most of them do. But they don't do their research because they don't know what they don't know. And then they put mom or dad into a care community and then find that it's not meeting their needs or their expectations, or they didn't have enough money to sustain living there long enough. And now that mom and dad are adjusted in the care community, now they have to go find someplace else for them to live because maybe that care community is private pay only.
Right.
So it's really, that's why I say it's really education based. It's really kind of curriculum based. There's over 25 different components to an aging plan that I do with my clients that purchase the comprehensive aging plan, so that they can make smart decisions and they can understand how to pay for care, and that they don't have to get burned out as a caregiver, because if there's enough supports in place for mom and dad at home to be healthy and vibrant and successful at home, then the kids don't have to constantly drop what they're doing and leave their jobs to tend to these issues that continually come up when there's not enough supports in place.
Right, and that's a far too common issue is the caregiver burnout, and then you have the sandwich component, the sandwich generation component, and just having a service like CareRight giving these families that extra support and kind of almost like a roadmap is really remarkably beneficial for them. What are the three? You mentioned you have 3 different packages or plans. What are the differences between 1, 2, and 3?
So one of the packages is more of like an introductory aging plan, giving them the lay of the land, like what home care can do. If their goal is to age in place at home, that can definitely happen, but you have to have the supports in place to make that work, right? So it's educating them about the benefits of aging in place at home, how to make that happen. So what can home care do? What's the value proposition of home care? What all can they do? I have clients that already receive home care because we join in the family's journey wherever they are, whether they're already in crisis or they're proactively planning, and we work with whomever they already have in place for professionals that they're already working with. But I have so many families that are receiving home care and they didn't even know that the aide could take them to doctor's appointments, or that, they don't understand necessarily that there's so much more that the home care companion can help them with. And they're like, oh, I had no idea.
Well, is that through a company or is that when they're hiring them privately?
Both actually.
Really?
Both.
Okay.
Yep. And I've had families that didn't realize that they could adjust the care plan with a home care company. They're like, no, we're only going to get 20 hours of care from them. And I'm like, no, you can always adjust that and get more. So
Yeah.
it's really educating families and letting them know that they've got great supports in place. We need to maximize it. Right. So that's one thing is is just kind of that introductory aging plan, just to give them that type of information, let them understand that when it comes time, or if it comes time that they can't stay at home, letting them, educating them about what are the differences and levels of care, what's independent living, what's assisted living, what's memory care, what's the cost structure, how does that all work? How do you qualify for those types of different care communities? Letting them understand, long-term care insurance, if your loved one has it, let's look at that policy so that you get more familiar with it. So if or when the time comes you need to engage with it, you're familiar and you're not dusting it off at the 11th hour trying to figure all this stuff out. So that's like kind of my most introductory basic package. And then because of the pandemic and the fear involved with having loved ones in these care communities, I created because you always have to listen to what the market says, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So people were pulling their loved ones from the care communities, and they were doing everything in their power to keep their loved one at home, leveraging families who were not at the office anymore because of the pandemic. So I created another package that is me facilitating the family meetings, or my team and I facilitating the family meetings and helping them understand care options, but not care communities, right? Because they were really trying to keep their loved one out.
Sure.
So really maximizing home care, the value of home care companies and how they could make that work using a layered approach with maybe adult daycare or home care. Because of the staffing shortages, some of my clients have 2 or 3 different home care companies working with them to fulfill those shifts, like those 24/7 shifts, right?
Yeah.
And then that comprehensive package, there's kind of two variations of that. It can be just the comprehensive aging plan, where again it's facilitating those family meetings, it's doing that care matrix, all that research. One geographic location for those care matrices takes my team about 30 hours to put that spreadsheet together, make the phone calls to all the care communities, call the home care companies, get the information on adult daycare, find out if there's certified aging in place specialists in that area. So it takes us about 30, sometimes 35 hours per matrix location. So it's labor intense. But if we didn't do that for those families, that's why they end up making poor decisions, because they don't know what they don't know. Or they're prematurely putting their loved ones in a care community because they didn't know that home care can do all of this stuff, or that there's aging in place specialists that can help remodel that house to make it more senior safe.
So now, do you guys always work in the background, in the sense that after a family, retains your services and you help and they get placed, or they find the right home care company to serve them, or whatever the long-term care solution would be, do you ever advocate for that family as well? And like, you would call the home care company and act on behalf of the family as well?
Yep. So that's some of our clients they just want that aging plan. And then on that last family meeting, we say, okay, so here's all the recommendations. Here's, home care, here's aging in place, here's a elder planning, attorney, whatever referrals and recommendations that the family needs. Then I'll say, okay, so here's the aging plan. Here's what needs to be done. And because they come to us in crisis, things are pretty messy and they don't have things buttoned up at all. Or they have expired power of attorney documents, meaning the person that they named 25 years ago is either dead, demented, or they don't have a relationship with that person anymore. So that's how comprehensive that comprehensive package is. And then at that last meeting, we talk about, do you want CareRight to help you implement the plan, or do you want to, as a family, divide and conquer? Most families, because they're so burned out by the time they find us or get referred to us, they're like, oh, we just don't have the emotional bandwidth to now make all these phone calls to, the home care or the attorney and get the tours scheduled at these care communities. So most of our clients are then on an ongoing care package. We also have an annual package where maybe the family does want to implement the plan on their own because they feel like they have enough supports in place that they can divide and conquer, making 15 or 20 different phone calls and implementing the plan.
Right.
But most of our clients, they'll go on an annual package where we'll check in with them, once a month or quarterly, and just make sure that they're doing okay if they wanted less of a white glove approach. But most of our clients, probably 90% of our clients, once we do that aging plan and on that last family meeting, they're like, oh, if you could help us implement it and oversee their care and work as their patient advocate, that's usually what families do.
I see.
Part of that aging plan, all of the plans that we have for families also incorporate, they get a checklist on how to tour these care communities with confidence. They get a checklist on, how to interview home care companies or things that they should think about with home care companies. They also get a checklist, a 7-page checklist on how to be a bold advocate so that they can make sure that their loved one is getting the best quality of care possible. We also provide them a whole printout, and we go over it with them too on what are the differences in levels of care, all the way from independent living to palliative care and hospice, because there's a lot of, again, misinformation about that. And so they're not making smart decisions because they don't know what they don't know. So again, it's really education based so they can make informed decisions.
And was it from, and I know you're also the author of the book, The Invisible Patient, the Emotional, Financial, and Physical Toll on Family Caregivers, which is available on Amazon, and there's the book there. Did you write that book based on your experiences with CareRight, or how did the book come about?
The book came about because for me to be able to try, there's there's statistics all over the place, but there's 65.7 million family caregivers out there in the United States. And for CareRight to try to reach as many of them as we can. And I understand that not everybody might be able to or not interested in a white glove approach aging plan process. So I wrote The Invisible Patient so that I could reach more families and educate them, because my brand is about educating families so they can make informed decisions. So in the book, The Invisible Patient, it's jam-packed with checklists and how to facilitate your own family meetings. It's everything that I do, white glove approach, in a book. And the purpose is to reach more families so that they can either try to do their own aging plan using my book as a manual or a reference guide. It came about because I've had literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families say, I wish there was a manual for what to do with mom and dad. So I wrote one.
Okay, that's wonderful. And they can get on Amazon. Is it available on your website as well?
It is. Yep. It's available on the website. We just have the link that goes to Amazon. Okay. The reason why I have the cover as a bench, a lonely bench, is because caregiving, when you don't have enough supports in place, can be very lonely, can be very isolating, and can be very depressing and full of angst. And it does not have to be that way if you have a plan and you start having family meetings and communicate about the what whens of aging. And the other thing is too, when you asked about what are some of the common things families come to me about, it's dementia progression. They really don't understand dementia. And they wouldn't, because most of them are in uncharted territory. But I can always tell when I'm working with a family who may not have been educated or taken time to educate themselves about dementia when they say things like, well, if dad's dementia gets worse. So I have, that's part of those ongoing care packages for families is, yes, we need to put that plan or that crisis management solutions in place first, but then let's go back and help you be successful with your demented loved one with having more meaningful visits, how not to argue and fight when how to use redirection and validation, and how home care or adult daycare programs or layering both of those can make your life so much easier. So if you know that bath time is a problem, outsource it. Don't be the one to do the shower then. It allows having that aging plan allows the adult kids and the spouse to just be the adult kids.
Be the child. Yeah, exactly.
Go visit your dad and watch a Packers game. I started my business in Wisconsin. So go spend the weekend with your dad watching the Packers game instead of having to, have a whole 15 checklist job list every time you go there. That's one of the things that families are always saying is, I just want to be the son or the daughter, or the spouse is saying, I don't identify as being the husband or the wife anymore.
Well, the
I'm
roles
a
change. The
caregiver.
roles change, and I just wanted to touch on one thing real quickly. Talking about home care, and of course, that's what our family business does here in Michigan. And when families find the right fit for their situation, that doesn't just mean having the care, whether it's long-term care facilities, assisted living, adult daycares, or home care. But those companies, they have a responsibility to provide that information and those resources to these families. It's just very disappointing when you say, families aren't aware that, the caregivers can take them on medical appointments or errands or just on an outing, and that they didn't know they could change their hours or their schedules. That should all be part of the care plan. The care plan is never written in stone. It's an ever evolving document, and the case managers that those families are working with, that's their job, is to check in and to have that open communication, to advise them and recommend things, or listen just as an ear to listen to. Mom had a really bad night last night. And that's where I think too, I always recommend to families, if they have the ability to do it, whether it's virtually or in person, join a caregiver support group, because that's a place where you're going to have a commonality with other people who are all maybe not experiencing the exact situations that you're going through, but the one commonality is you're all a caregiver in some capacity, where your friends and your social circle may not be experiencing those things. So these people are there to be your support, and you're there to be their support, and you build that, that network together. So if mom is having a bad night, call your friend from the caregiver support group, just as an ear to listen to, because at least they can understand to some degree what you're experiencing and going through, or celebrate the small victories. Mom had a great night last night and she slept for 8 hours, and it is an emotional, financial, and physical toll. And I just love the title of your book, because it really is more than just hands-on care. It affects every aspect of your life. And, being there and knowing that there's resources like CareRight really will make a profound difference, a positive, profound difference in people's journeys as caring for their loved ones and finding what's best for their loved ones.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I say this probably 15 times a day, because we have a lot of clients, right? And they all come to CareRight from word of mouth referral, because I don't advertise. But when you do a good job and your pricing is fair and your family sees the value in what you've done with them, they
Right.
just continue to make referrals, right? Like you're in that same position. You get a lot of word of mouth referrals too. And so I say every single day on these 30-minute consults, caregiving and aging and dementia progression can be a positive experience if you know what you're up against with with dementia, if you have enough supports in place, if your family's communicating well, and if you know what your next level option is. If where you are right now isn't working, what's the next step? What's the contingency plan? And I say that every day. And I think that's why families, on those 30-minute consults, they're like, oh, this makes perfect sense, because for that 30 minutes or 45 minutes that we spend with them on the phone, they can just kind of unplug enough to be like, oh, they have the intellect to be like, oh, this makes perfect sense. Even with the dementia progression, or chronic disease progression, families, I call it that caregiver snowball. It starts out kind of manageable, like, oh, sure, I can come over once a week. And then the next thing they know, they're not only just dropping off groceries, they're giving mom a shower, they're helping her in the toilet. Now they're changing her bed linens because she had an accident. Now it's become a part-time job, and now they have to take vacation days to coordinate doctor's appointments that one doctor's appointment can take all day,
All
right?
day. Right.
And it doesn't have to get to that point if you have enough supports and services in place and you're communicating as a family. So even though 92% of my clients come to me in crisis, 85% of those families, because they're so burned out or they have so many perceptions about aging and quality of life and how to spend the inheritance, I'm doing mediation with 85% of my clients because they're so burned out, or they don't understand what they don't know, right?
Absolutely.
And as far as that online support group too, because I'm trying to do everything that I can in my power to reach as many families as possible. So I also started the CareRight Family Caregiver Solutions Facebook page, it's a free group. And every day we put content in there or information about self-care. What is an aging plan? What does home care do? And you're going to be a guest on my podcast next week. And that's going to end up in the group so that they understand what home care can do for them. And then every week, every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, I do a Facebook Live. So like yesterday, I talked about warning signs of caregiver burnout and, what are the role changes that you may expect, with not always feeling like being the son or the daughter or the spouse, right? So that was our topic yesterday. So every Wednesday at 3 p.m. we have a Facebook Live where I share information that's going to help these families be more successful. Now, if they want to learn how to develop their own aging plan, then they can take my class on where I walk them through how to facilitate your family meeting. Everything that I do white glove approach, I've created modules, and I'll teach them as a group how to develop their own aging plan.
Wonderful. Well, we are going to have the links to your Facebook group as well as to the book and to the CareRight website and all of your social media platforms. And it's just been a wonderful conversation that this work that you're doing at CareRight is just remarkably, remarkably needed. And it's tremendous that, you've taken this on as your mission. And I know you're positively affecting lives all over the world. And we just really appreciate your time with us here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on as your guest today and all that you do. So everything that we do is important for these families.
That's right.
Best success.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Annalee.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the CareRight podcast. We hope today's discussion has provided you with valuable insights. If so, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with others who might find it helpful. Remember, CareRight is more than just a podcast. It's a community dedicated to supporting family caregivers with comprehensive care planning, crisis management, and resources for every stage of aging. Stay connected with us for future episodes as we continue to explore essential topics in aging planning, elder care, and financial planning. Until next time, take care, plan wisely, and remember, you're not alone in your caregiving journey.